I'm Jason Bradford.
I'm Asher Miller.
And I'm Rob Dietz. Welcome to Crazy Town, where Mad Men meets Mad Max.
This is producer Melody Travers. In this season of Crazy Town, Jason, Asher, and Rob are exploring the watershed moments in history that have led humanity into the cascading crises we face in the 21st century. Today's episode is about advertising and how it has become ubiquitous and more potent over time. The watershed moment took place in 1927. At the time, the estimated carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere was 308 parts per million, and the global human population was 2 billion.
Hey, Jason Asher. You know how much I love movies, right?
We do. Our listeners know how much you love them.
Yeah, well, what it really is, it's that feeling of getting lost in the story. I mean, that can happen with other media, books, maybe even a podcast here and there, or something else. But movies kind of have a magic to me. I love the way the story and the imagery and the sound all come together, and they can wash over you. And I don't know, like I lose track of time. I get lost in it when it's a good movie.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, there's a key concept for that to be able to happen to you. It's called suspension of disbelief.
Or kind of losing your cognitive function.
You go along for the ride, basically.
Yeah.
Like this thing, the fact that people are floating in outer space and shooting space aliens.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. One of the more recent movies where I got lost in it was the animated Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
Came out in 2018, and it's a ridiculous movie if you analyze the likelihood of these events occurring. But if you set aside,
Which part?
Yeah, I know, right? But like set aside your disbelief, and you're, like you said, along for the ride.
I can't take it when they film in the wrong location and the plants are wrong.
Yes, so this
That does not surprise me.
This is the kind of thing that takes you where you can no longer suspend your disbelief.
Like, you're not in New England, you're in Florida.
Right. So,
I see Spanish moss. Shut up.
So,
Tillandsia usinoides.
Well, there's other things too, right? Like really bad special effects could do it, or super cheesy dialogue, But I got to tell you, the thing, Jason, you've revealed the thing that takes you out of that. For me, it's the shameless product placement.
Oh, that's good stuff.
That's the only reason I go to watch films. Is I want to know what products.
Well, maybe you were around at our watershed moment this time. 1927. The movie was Wings. Did you see that in the theater when it came out?
How old do you think I am?
Wait, that was Paul McCartney's group after the Beatles.
Yeah, exactly.
Old? Are we talking about your actual age or how old your soul is?
Well, we know how old my soul is.
Yeah, you got old soul.
So Wings was a silent film about two World War I pilots. It actually was the first winner of the Academy Award for Best
only
Picture.
entrant, probably.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe so. But that's not why it was the watershed moment. It's the first time that a Hollywood movie had a product placement.
What? In 1927?
Yeah, the two
Holy
pilots
shit.
are sitting there and a Hershey's bar falls
Nice.
out of the guy's bag.
I mean,
something.
it's a great thing to have when you're up in the air as a flyboy and you just need a quick calorie. I mean, totally.
So
I recommend Hershey's for that.
Did they actually it was like a real product placement thing? It wasn't just a random prop.
Yeah, no, when you're making a movie, every single scene is perfectly thought
They
out.
zoom in on a Hershey's bar.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
trying to sell Hershey's bars.
Okay, cool.
Nice.
And I had my own experience with this when I was about 10 years old, and Superman 2 came out. It was the number one grossing movie the summer, I think, of 1981. And I remember I'm watching it, and they get to this big fight in the middle of the movie where the bad guys are, they're super people also.
Yes, they came from the same planet as Superman.
Yeah.
I remember this.
So the leader is
Krypton, wasn't it?
Yeah, Krypton. The leader is General Zod, right?
Yeah.
Played by Terrence Stamp.
How the fuck do you know this?
It's crazy.
Come on, who doesn't know this? So So he picks up Superman, played by Christopher Reeve.
I know that. I knew that.
Yeah. Throws him through a Marlboro truck.
Good. They're still allowing that.
They were advertising for Marlboro at the time.
So not to be outdone, Superman picks up General Zod and throws him into a massive electrified Coca-Cola sign, which explodes in glory.
Both of those are great, incredibly addictive products.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so, I mean, it blew me away because, I'm a 10-year-old kid, and I'm like, why did they just get thrown through a Marlboro truck? Like, why does that?
You were actually aware enough at that time to like think about that?
Yeah, really. Like I said, this is the thing that takes me out of being able to suspend
at that
disbelief.
age,
Yeah, that's a pretty good job.
Interesting.
It's
Pretty good job.
ridiculous.
You're
You have
advanced.
a bizarre
You're advanced.
brain.
I don't disagree with you. You're old soul. I'm bizarre brain. Jason is what?
These are Superman superpower names.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Well, so this whole thing of product placement has been ramping up over time. Heineken, that delicious beer Heineken,
Oh, yeah,
right?
refreshing.
Paid.
My peoples made that beer.
They paid $45 million for 7 seconds of screen time in a 2012 James Bond movie.
I remember that movie, but I don't remember the Heineken part. I'm sorry.
Don't tell them, they're gonna be so bummed.
You don't know. Maybe you've been drinking a lot of Heineken. Direct result,
I'm a local microbrew guy.
Of course you
Fancy.
Well, I got to take us to the next generation of Superman. It was quaint what happened in the Superman I was describing.
Yeah, okay.
In 2013, they kind of remade the story in a movie called Man of Steel. And before the movie hit the theaters, they had already made $170 million by selling ads.
Wow.
There's like just
Product placement.
product placements
in the film,
in the movie. Yeah, they're all over. Like one of the guys works at IHOP, and there's IHOP imagery everywhere.
So my stepmother, her sister, this is what she does for a living: is product placement for films.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I mean I've talked to her a little bit about it, but she tries to be very thoughtful about the kinds of to make the products fit the characters.
She would ask, what kind of truck would Zod throw Superman through?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm sure that's exactly what it is.
Right.
It's probably a little different with these mega budget, superhero action films than probably the films that she's doing, right?
Yeah, so for a kids movie, she's going to go after Toys R Us as a sponsor or something.
They're gone, dude.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, out of business.
Halsboro or something like that? Hashboro or Hasbro? I don't know. Whatever.
So it's interesting to talk about the product placement stuff, but obviously that's not the beginning of advertising.
No.
You talked about a watershed moment, but
I just had to go with the kind of manipulative aspect of that.
Sure.
Just throwing a product into a movie.
But can we just do like a quick scan of history on advertising just for a second?
Well, you do it. I don't want to.
Okay, I'll do it. And I'm actually going to give some props to a website called softcube.com, who actually had, I thought, a really interesting history of advertising.
And they're paying us for this, right?
Exactly. Damn it, you're not supposed to say it.
Sorry, we need to read. Okay.
We're moving from product placement. This was product placement.
sorry.
Now you're making it like a clear sponsorship.
Yeah, you lost the chance for influencer marketing.
You've ruined
There's no more suspension of disbelief in our audience.
Damn it. So the first case of advertising that they point to actually comes from a guy named James Playstead Wood, who wrote a book called The Story of Advertising. And then he talks about how these archaeologists found what is considered to be the first known written ad that was written in Thebes around 3000 BCE, long time ago. Guess what it was for? Guess what that ad was for?
Oh, my Lord.
Oh, wow.
Togas.
Okay, wait a second.
Interesting.
Where was it?
Egypt.
In
Ancient Egypt.
Egypt. Oh, gosh.
I don't think that
It was for pyramid bricks.
God. Wine. It was for wine.
Interesting. Nope. Slave.
Oh, gosh. No.
So I'm actually going to read this to you. Okay. Oh. Here's the ad. It's brilliant. The man-slave Shem, having run away from his good master, Hapu the Weaver, all good citizens of Thebes are enjoyed to help return him. He is Hittite, 5 foot 2 inches tall, of ruddy complexion and brown eyes. For news of his whereabouts, half a gold coin is offered. And for his return to the shop of Hapu the Weaver, wear the best cloth woven to your desires. A whole gold coin is offered. Wow. So he's actually advertising his store, his shop, as part of this.
Look how he slipped that in.
Yeah.
That's freaking ingenious.
Beautiful. Isn't that great? But so there are different forms that happen over time. I mean, in China over 1,000 years ago, the government actually required salespersons to sign their products with a logo so that they could track it.
Oh, logo industry starts. Nice.
They were spamming in medieval books. So the way that would happen is scribes would be hired. You know, as people got more literate, more people were reading books. Even before the Gutenberg press, there were scribes who would make copies of books, right? Mm-hmm. And the best scribes were hired to do these things. So there's a case of a scribe named Hernice who wrote the following note in a book that he copied for a client. In the very end, the last page of it, "If someone would like such a handsome book, come and look me up in Paris across the Notre Dame Cathedral." So he's like putting this in. It's not like the guy who paid him to copy this thing for him was like, go ahead and advertise in it. You know? Right. But he was doing that.
Oh, there's a lot of good jobs in medical scribing nowadays. So I think we should look this guy up.
Maybe they should be doing it.
Yeah.
I like how your history of advertisers is already putting them in kind of the slime category.
Oh, totally, yeah. Now, of course, advertising really picks up with newspapers, right? You get the printing press and you get newspapers and books and all these things. And newspapers were running ads back to the early 1700s. But it was really like around the 19th century, 1836, there was the first newspaper called The Press that managed to actually reduce the price that the reader would have to pay for the newspaper by subsidizing it through advertising, right?
Wow.
Which I think was a really seminal moment. And then the first advertising agency in the United States was founded in 1841. The first radio ad was released in 1922.
And I think that's the key, okay? I'm glad you mentioned that radio ad, because what we're talking about here and why we're considering sort of the watershed moment being this era in the 1920s is that now you're getting the mass distribution of advertising through media that can go, nationwide. Because newspapers used to be pretty local and stuff. And so it wasn't really until you could get like AM radio, boom, and then, of course, television, and boom, and then movies distributed all over. And so these new technologies were important. And we're going to get into later how this sort of parallels other changes in society, like mass production. And stuff.
Yeah. But first, I want to stick with the development of the ads themselves. I mean, this is all going to tie in, I think, like you were saying, Jason, with broader trends of society. But let's run through some things that were actually happening in advertising as sort of post-watershed moment.
Yeah.
And where I want to take this is into the realm of psychology and the study of human behavior. This was a field that was really developing in this era as well.
Yeah, it's new.
And really expanding and coming on in the in the post-war era.
Freud was the first ad man, right?
Well, I've got a villain for you guys who kind of likens himself as a Freudian disciple. Guy named Ernest Dichter.
Okay, sorry, that was my juvenile reaction.
Wait a second, Ernest Dichter.
Yeah. So Ernest Dichter was a Freudian. He was a Freudian psychoanalyst who was called the Freud of Madison Avenue.
Oh my God, no.
So he actually trained in Vienna. At one point, he lived on the same street that Freud had lived on. He was a guy who fled Europe in 1938 to get away from the Nazis.
He wasn't a Jew, right?
That's a good move.
I don't know, actually. But he ended up moving to New York, and he became a consultant to the ad agencies.
Interesting.
And one of his big things that he brought to the table here was the study of people in focus groups. So, and what he was interested in is uncovering what's the behavior here that I can capitalize on to sell more products. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. In the early 50s, Betty Crocker, the confectionery company.
Love that stuff. Love Betty Crocker products. Wonderful.
Yeah.
I grew up on them.
Yeah.
It's like makes me comfortable.
You're trying to do it again.
Oh, sorry.
The sponsor theater. People are going to suspend disbelief in this podcast.
Is Betty Crocker still in business?
Oh yeah, they're wonderful cakes.
She lives next door, right? Well, okay, so they had this instant cake mix, and it was not selling very well. And so he assembles a focus group, and what he finds out is that women who were baking these cakes felt guilty because it was sort of like taking away the work that they were doing.
It was like, just add water.
Yeah, this is just like this. It's too
hard
easy. Seriously, pour water in. So the key that he came up with is that we've got to have them still crack an egg and mix it in.
Freaking brilliant.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and after
That's
that,
amazing.
Yeah, sales soared after that.
So it's really understanding the motivation of people. That's really interesting. And their identity, I guess, right? Sense of identity.
Oh, Jason is slow clapping it.
I love that. I love this story.
Here's one other example of Dichter's kind of psychological games. He was kind of behind the first TV commercial for Barbie in 1959. And the thing was, after doing focus groups and whatnot, they ended up selling her as a sort of fashion-oriented role model for children rather than a doll.
I mean, she was an incredible role model.
Yeah.
Barbie.
But I mean, they didn't mention doll in the ads. You know, they were like, "This is what you aspire to be." And
Interesting.
In
'Cause
true
different outfits, so you can have to wear different outfits.
yes, yeah. But in true villain psychoanalyst fashion,
Okay.
Dichter, of course, suggested enlarging Barbie's breasts,
Shit.
going to the lowest common denominator here.
Oh
Wow,
my gosh.
that's lovely.
Well, I mean, things have just gotten better since then. though.
Yeah, right. It's
yeah.
true. Yeah.
That's always a theme here. Things just keep getting
Yeah.
better and
I mean,
better.
It's progress. So, I think that what happened next, and Naomi Klein gets into this in her book, No Logo, is the shift beyond products to brands.
Oh, so like when they take the hot iron and push it into your skin?
Yes, that is a good one. No, but I mean, like, the whole brands themselves become the thing that's being sold. So what do they represent? So what brands represent you? Or, I'm just like, Rob, think about it, guys.
Well, yeah, I'm wearing a North Face sweatshirt right now. Right?
Okay, so
Which means I can climb sheer cliffs of ice one-handed in winter.
Right, so when you walk around with that, people know what a badass outdoorsman you are.
That's right, yeah.
That's your brand image, right? What about you, Ashera?
God, it's a tough one. I'm thinking L'Oreal.
Oh yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Very good. That's wonderful. I see that in you. I'm a Lululemon guy myself.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So okay. Anyway, so Klein argues that there's this profound shift that happens in the 1980s, and they're not necessarily producers. These big corporations aren't so worried about producing, like making stuff. They're marketing the ideals behind the brand. And so Klein's quotes, "What these companies produced primarily were not things, but images of their brands." And for example, Philip Morris, who was having an image problem at the time,
I wonder why.
Yeah, in 1988.
Well, it was right after Superman got thrown through their truck.
Yeah.
That was the turning point for them.
So in 1988, Philip Morris, needing to rebrand, purchases Kraft Foods for $12.6 billion.
Because Velveeta will always help your image.
Kraft singles.
Yeah, exactly. This was 6 times what analysts thought it was worth, but I think they were probably desperate to get a new image, right? And they were owning that. They were owning now the Kraft brand.
What people don't realize is that directly led to the 6-time Super Bowl champion Patriots.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
right.
Kraft.
Oh, interesting.
It also led to the marketing of cheese cigarettes, which are really, really terrible.
That was a flop, wasn't it?
Yeah, that
Didn't work out very well.
Like that.
Trying to light the tips on them just melted.
Right.
Oh, melted cheese right at your fingertips.
Well, Velveeta, there's Velveeta for you.
Right. So, Polaroid no longer is selling cameras. It's selling...
Actually, you're right. They are.
Right.
No, there's a comeback. They're
There
kind of kitschy, fun.
That's led by our good friend Todd Brilliant.
But it is about the social lubricant that happens when you have instant photos in your party, these kind of things. And IBM is selling business solutions, not computers.
Well, again, true. They're probably not selling computers anymore.
Right.
Well, Volvo tried to make a brand change from selling cars to moving people. They're still selling cars.
Yeah.
That didn't work out.
Yeah,
too
beyond petroleum.
No, that was
that didn't quite work.
That's called greenwashing.
Yeah. So, what any others you can think of, guys? Come on.
Well, actually, I think it's interesting because when you think about brand identity, people tying their identity to a brand.
Yeah.
I remember like it's sort of the doldrum days of Apple, right?
Oh, this was like the mid-90s.
No, I would say late 80s into the 90s,
Okay.
right? Like Apple had been a hot company when they first came out with personal computers, and then Microsoft just absolutely kicked ass, and all these PC-based companies selling computers. And Apple wasn't successful. They became very niche. You know, it's hard for people to imagine now, younger generations to imagine now, but it wasn't until the iPod and then the iPhone that Apple really made a huge comeback, is now like one of the biggest companies in the world. But for a while there, it was like this really niche, like almost like a 1% of the market. And I knew people who were like hardcore Apple users, and they loved the fact that it was a pain in the ass to have this computer because there were no software you could use. It was all like, none of it was Microsoft based. But for them, it was like a point of pride, because they were bucking sort of.
Look at me. I've got a useless box on my desk.
I seem to like go after like the creatives, like, the people doing digital imagery.
And then remember they did that really successful Think Different ad campaign when they had like Einstein in it and shit.
Yeah. So counter to the corporate sort of IBM suit guys. Yeah.
Well, then you of course get it taken up to the next level where famous brands often don't make a damn thing anymore. They just slap their names on something and brand it. And, the obvious one in the United States is Donald Trump. He buys a hotel, he buys someone's wine and sticks his name on it.
But he's a rancher, right? Because he's got a whole steak line.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. I see him out in the ranch.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing with Trump there is, he was a businessman, he had businesses, but most of his money didn't come from development. It was coming from licensing his name to shit, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a good point, which is now people think of themselves, celebrities think of themselves as a brand, and they very much focus on what they do with themselves and the public as a brand.
Yeah. Well, you brought this whole topic up, Jason, as a progression and the kind of insidiousness of advertising. I'm going to take us to the next set of nastier techniques, and I want to start there with something that's called stigma marketing.
Oh.
And I read about this in a Heath Brothers book. And the example they use was the selling of dandruff shampoo in China. And what happened is dandruff was not considered a problem in China. I mean, people had dandruff, but nobody cared. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the dandruff shampoo, I think it was Head and Shoulders, had to make people care.
Right.
So they basically inserted this anxiety into the Chinese population, like, oh my God, you have dandruff. That's a horrible social problem. And look, we've got the solution for you.
That's genius.
Wow.
I think
they invented an issue in a sense.
It's really gross.
And they have a billion consumers now.
Yeah, and really manipulative.
Well, that reminds me of, and I can't remember the name of the company, and they're not sponsoring us anyway, so fuck them. One of these pharmaceutical companies was working on a medicine. I don't even know what it was for. It was for a health issue. But they found that one of the side effects of taking the medicines is that it grew people's eyelashes out.
Oh, I could use that.
Yeah, right. So they're like, well, what do we do with this thing? We sunk all this money into this thing. It doesn't really work very well. But can we do anything with this side effect? And so they actually kind of invented a disease. You know what I mean? And then started promoting and selling this product
the
as a
thin
cure
eyelash disease?
Short eyelashes as a cure to this. And I think Brooke Shields was like a rep for this company. I can't remember what the hell it was.
Oh, she's
like
stunning,
suddenly
stunning
women
eyelashes.
are being told, your eyelashes are too short. It's a big problem. Buy this fucking drug.
Oh, the whole mascara industry is probably pissed.
Well, and who knows what the other side effects of that medication were.
Well, they'll figure out another way to sell it. So we're talking about nastier techniques. We got to get into sort of the online era.
Yeah. That's really where I feel like the potential has been realized. You know?
So I want to tell you about a guy named Ethan Zuckerman. And in this, some of our listeners may be familiar with this story, but he's now an associate professor of public policy and communication information at the University of Massachusetts. I think before he was at MIT. In 2014, he wrote kind of like a mea culpa piece in The Atlantic, apologizing for his role in what he calls the original sin of the internet. And that was its dependence on advertising, right? So he's famous or infamous for creating the pop-up ad.
Oh, nice.
And here's the story.
Oh,
right?
who doesn't love a great pop-up ad?
Actually, I wonder, like younger people probably don't even know what we're talking about with pop-up ads. People our age, and older who grew up in the early days of the internet know what a fucking
Nightmare
was. Pop, 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 pop.
Crazy.
Yeah, you could get like 20 ads just on top of each other, just blasting you in the face.
Clicking,
Yeah, exactly.
clicking.
It almost felt like getting punched.
Yeah.
So he's the guy who fucking created this. And here's what happened. He was working in a company called Tripod, right, in the 1990s. They wound up becoming a web page hosting provider. So nowadays, it's really easy to create a web page, have a host or whatever, a whole website. They have all these tools. In the early days, that was really hard. And people didn't have like robust websites. They had web pages, right? So there were sites like GeoCities and other places where you can kind of like express yourself on the internet. And so they had something like that. And they tried different ways of trying to figure out, well, how do we financially support this? And the only thing that actually worked for them was selling advertising. So they were selling these banner ads at the top of these people's web pages, and they were served up randomly, right? They got advertisers, they got users, they just randomly served up ads on people's pages. Until one day, this like major car company freaked out because one of their ads was running on a web page that was like basically all about celebrating anal sex. And they're like, no, we don't want our brand advertised on this page, right? So
Wait, who's going to advertise anal sex? What are you talking about?
No, they're advertising the car on an anal sex web page.
yeah, they didn't want their car ad on a page that was about anal sex.
I
is what
see.
It was.
I got confused
Yes,
for a
you
second.
did.
And
Yes, you
of
did.
course, at that time, what is it? 97% of web pages were about
Anal sex.
Probably. Yeah.
So, they freak out. So Ethan creates basically the pop-up ad, which allows there to be some distance, right? It's not the banner image on the page.
Right.
It's like this separate pop-up, the separate window that pops up on your computer,
It was
right?
serving an important function.
It's like a technicality. Really.
I know. It's
It's
Absolutely.
not really on that page.
it's like cracking an egg for Betsy Crocker. Right.
But what's I think, more profoundly important about all this stuff is it's not so much the annoyance of the pop-up ads, which eventually people figured out. They created pop-up blockers, and that didn't work anymore as a way of generating revenue, right? Mm-hmm. But it was really about the fact that, like, to maximize these advertising dollars, you had to know something about the user in order to serve up
to target
the right ads,
Yes.
right? So that led us down this road of basically fuck privacy. The user is the product now, right?
Wow.
And we're going to try to capture as much information about our users as possible in order to target them with advertising.
Yeah, that is a really big, really important turning point, I think, in ramping up how manipulative and insidious ads are. There's another thing that was happening kind of soon after that, too, though, which is the automation of advertising processes. And I didn't really know much about this. I mean, I suspected there's all kinds of processes going on to figure out what ad I get. But there's a guy named Tim Wong who wrote a book in 2020 called Subprime Attention Crisis. And he talks about one of the sort of behind the scenes processes that happens when you get an ad on a website or social media or wherever. And he says the advertisements that you see online are not predetermined. At the moment you click the link and load up the page, a signal from the ad server triggers an instantaneous auction. Who's going to buy a $2020, $2020,
It's faster than that. It's the speed of light.
It is, exactly. He says this auction determines which ad is going to get delivered to you. The highest bidder gets to load its ad on the website and into your eyeballs, and that's what he says in the book. The process happens at the speed of light.
Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. There's an auction going on where AIs are basically managing it all.
Yeah.
Wow. It's like how they buy and sell stocks nowadays, too, in some
And
ways.
what's interesting too is just that there's a whole field of psychology and advertising, right? And how fucking devious and also clever all that is in terms of understanding human psychology and those things. But now with the technology the way it is and their ability to track, it's just about your actual behavior. You don't need to like study people.
Right,
you know what I mean?
right.
Do focus groups and try to understand, well, suburban women are like this. Right. They can actually track where you are on a webpage, what you're looking at. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow. How long you hover over something.
Yeah, and they're just serve up shit based upon what you've just looked at.
Makes old Dictor look pretty quaint, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now, something I'm trying to get in, guys, honestly, is to become an influencer.
Well, you're already an influencer to me.
Well, thank you. And I got this YouTube channel for my farm, Soul Cycle Farm on YouTube, and I've only got 116 subscribers.
I think that means you're not an influencer.
No, but this is a process that builds.
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh.
And no, if I get 1,000, I've looked into this carefully because I'm trying to become an influencer. If I get 1,000 subscribers, I can get ad revenue. And
nice.
I think there's lots of opportunities for me because did you see that Tucker Carlson special where the guy had the light box on his junk?
You're going to have to explain.
I did not, and I don't think I want to hear this.
Did you say light box on his junk?
It's tanning the gonads to improve your testosterone output. And I think...
Oh, so it's like a red light kind of thing.
It's not that men need to be more manly. And, I'm a farmer. I know all about light and how important it is.
Right.
I'm a natural for some product like that or others.
Right.
So
you're a man. You're a manly man.
I'm a manly man, do manly things.
Right.
And the light's important.
And you farm in the buff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah, like everybody on this show.
I was right with my prediction. I really didn't want to hear about it.
Anyway, so I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
This is why you're pitching our listeners to go and subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe. Yeah.
Soul Cycle Farm on YouTube.
And maybe they can get ads. Okay. But
it's a win-win for everyone.
Exactly.
The problem is nobody knows how to spell soul. They're thinking S-O-U-L.
No, it's S-O-L like the sun, like the light.
No, I thought it was S-O-L-E.
It is because it's one guy.
Stop it.
The English language is really messed up, by the way.
Okay. Seriously, though, as if we can be serious.
Yeah.
The influence marketing system is getting kind of huge as well. This is the other thing. And this guy named Sanal Aral in his book, The Hype Machine, talks about these sort of special people that are now empowered by social media to spread behavior change. It's a $10 billion a year industry.
And I'm sure it's growing, actually, exponentially, probably.
It's growing huge. Yeah. There's some great examples. People who will get these products, and this one woman, for example, Ariel Charnas, is an influencer, and he talks about when she posted a picture of the Peter Thomas Roth Rose Stem Cell Biorepair Gel Mask to Snapshot in 2016. Snapshot, whatever, Snapchat.
Showing your age there.
Yeah.
Are you on Snapshot these days? Are you on Polaroid Snapshot?
No, I got an account on MyFace as well, so look for me there. Anyhow, the company was thrilled. She sold $17,565 worth of masks in a day. And then, though, she steps up. She's now partnering with...
Wait, can we just stop for a second and talk about the naming of their product? Maybe they need some marketing help there. I don't know.
You know what it is?
What did you call it? The stem cell bio...
Repair gel mask.
Wow. I think you're not understanding this. This is about having as many keywords in your product name as possible.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Smart. Always.
Well, then she collaborates with Nordstrom's. And... She helped sell $1 million in the first 24 hours of Nordstrom products, crashing their website.
Nice.
Within an hour of the release. And it generated, they estimate, an additional $4 to $5 million in sales.
Good deal for them, huh?
Yeah.
That's nice.
So these influencers, are important. And again, it's Soul Cycle Farm, SOLCYCLE Farm. And if I get 1,000 subscribers, I can become an influencer too and get ad revenue.
This is like our first time we've had an actual real sponsor in this show, isn't it?
Well, I haven't spent any money on you.
That's
guys.
true. That is true. Well, okay, so this whole notion of collecting data on people and selling to them goes under the name micro-targeting. And I just got to say, talking about the increasing levels of insidiousness, how do I say it? Evilness, heinousness, bullshitiousness, it drives me nuts. Like you have all this personal data that's being collected on you just so they can sell you more shit.
Well, the crazy stuff is, for example, we we were getting our shows together, and we'll talk about the show, and we'll talk about like Tony Robbins, for
Joel
example.
Osteen,
or Joel Osteen.
When you had that damn inspiration box, and I'm getting ads for it.
Right. Next thing you know, we're blowing up with ads about this stupid stuff we talk about.
Yes,
they're listening.
That is the worst. The way your devices and apps are listening and tracking and then selling based on that.
You don't want ads for Joel Osteen's Inspiration Cube?
Oh, God.
Nor Tony Robbins.
God,
Oh,
I do
God.
not. So yeah, I guess in summary, shit's gotten bad.
Okay, well, let's go back to sort of like the why we're talking about all this and how this all came to be, and think about where we are. We're in the Great Depression, the sort of the 1920s. This is
1930s.
Well, yeah, 1920s, 1930s, right? And the Roaring 20s, and then the Depression, and we come out of the Second World War, and we just ramped up industrial production like crazy for the war, and now we have all this sort of surplus production. We're in a Cold War. We're trying to sell capitalism and democracy and our way of life to the world, and so there was this huge drive, basically, to get the people that went through the Depression and were rationing during a war to finally say, oh no, I'm going to basically pull for the American dream and just go for it. So the advertising industry essentially was telling people that this is what you needed to do now, right? And it all fit together with improvements in credit systems and financing and all the big wave of home buying and the suburbia and the freeway system with the transportation.
Yeah.
And they did this knowingly. This was not just accidental. They saw this as was happening. So here's a quote from a guy, an economist and marketer, Victor, how would you say
Lebeau.
that? Lebeau.
Yeah.
Okay. His article, Price Competition in 1955 in the Journal of Retailing.
Stimulating reading, by the way.
Yes.
That was a top journal, the Journal of Retailing.
Journal of
Page
Retailing.
turner.
Yeah. Okay. He says, quote, our enormous productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfactions in consumption. The measure of social status, of social acceptance, of prestige is now to be found in our consumptive patterns. The very meaning and significance of our lives today expressed in consumptive terms. Is this another guy we want to punch in the face?
Yeah, probably.
Oh,
yeah.
God, that's 1955, folks.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about Marvin Harris, right? And cultural materialism, the whole idea that sort of infrastructure, the physical world, is the driver of the structures, our political systems, economic systems, in our superstructure, our belief systems, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's worth pointing out here that we have a situation where, like he's basically saying, is the productive capacity of industry, right?
Yeah.
We talked about fossil fuels and the harnessing of fossil fuels. We've talked about industrialization, the development of technologies. We've talked about things like assembly lines and efficiency and the production and manufacturing of stuff. All that's come together to create a whole bunch of shit that is cheap to produce, can be done on a massive scale, but you need people to buy it, right? You need people to want it. And so it was kind of like that same sort of dynamic of driving this industry to sort of advertising to look at how you create that demand.
Yeah, it's incredible to see how it's put into stark terms of the very meaning and significance of our lives. I mean, God.
But it came to these structural things. I mean, you talked about, like, there are other things. You talked a bit about it. It's like they looked at these other barriers to this. One was this identity stuff, wanting to people to desire something that they might not even need, right? But the other is making it easy for people to actually buy shit.
Yeah.
So easy credit, going into debt, credit cards, all that stuff. And all of it to serve the growth imperative because our economic system needed to grow. Yeah. So it's back. It's part of this larger system that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Well, you talk about Lebeau just being completely frank about this and sort of laying his cards on the table in I guess it was a public journal.
Yeah,
I mean,
very nice journal. Very prestigious.
I mean, it almost sounds like a secret missive that somebody intercepted, but it's not. And Dichter, about our other villain of this advertising story, he actually, kind of like LeBeau, laid his cards on the table too, but there's a bit of an irony to it because he thought he was doing well. Basically, his issue was that he thought capitalism and all of this consumerism, this sort of buying of stuff, was the way to have a thriving democracy. And so he and his conspirators would talk openly about this. He had a book, Dichter did, in 1960, and here's a quote from that. He says, "Among the declarations of faith in the future is the act of buying. Buying is more than a commercial function. It deserves scientific study without moral judgment. When I buy more or less expensive food, when I buy cheaper or more expensive cigarettes, when I curtail the quantity of my purchases, I am in effect underwriting a life philosophy with my buying act." Wow. Really similar to LeBeau, but this notion of we're building a better society this way, it's like they couldn't see into the future where this was headed.
But I think you also have to look at the connection to labor, for example. I mean, this was the height of unions as well. And you could see how the promise of a better paying job, a secure job, a good quality of life is also dependent upon having a manufacturing job in the auto industry, which is in a sense, in some ways, is predicated on people buying a new car every a few fucking years, right? Yes. Based upon a new style change or whatever the hell it is, that actually underwrites people being lifted out of poverty, having a middle class life. Like you could see how it sort of becomes built in to an expectation for the economy that everyone's bought into.
Yeah, you see it as a virtuous cycle or circle, but it's really as you're consuming and going through all the materials and all the energy and
which we've talked a lot about, all the sort of downsides.
So it's this non-virtuous feedback loop in a sense when you start getting into the consequences for the environment, et cetera. But at the time, we're thinking, woohoo! Yeah. Look what we've done. This is magical. This is wonderful. Well, and we've got all this communications technology. We're getting televisions and radio and movies more and more popular, and people are tuning in together. That we don't have this fragmented media so much like we have today. So this was this time in a sense of mass consumption developing and a lot of social cohesion as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point there is that even if they had all this productive capacity, right? We've got manufacturing industry, you've got cheap input of fossil fuel energy, all this stuff. You get the road system to distribute this. You still need a means by which to do widespread marketing. And that's where radio and television and then obviously the internet come in order to create that. And that helps support these incredibly large brands, these global corporations who are multi-billion dollar companies. And that wouldn't be possible, right, without the advertising and the communications technology to support that. To me, one of the key things to recognize in all of this, and it gets a little bit back to the statement that I talked about earlier with Ethan Zuckerman, what he said is sort of like his mea culpa of the original sin of the internet, right. Advertising is, it goes back further than that. I mean, I don't know if you could say definitively it starts with radio and then television, but when you had ads in newspapers or even product placement in film, it was a way of generating some additional revenue, might reduce their costs to the end consumer or whatever it is that they're able to do. But they weren't dependent on that advertising revenue necessarily to create that product. But now we're in a situation with radio and television and the internet where you need it, right? Yeah. Advertising is the blood.
Even what we call public radio, in a sense nowadays, is underwritten by ads.
And I think it's worth really talking about how you used the term insidious before, Rob, but the profound impact of that. Because when you're in a system where the mediums by which we are finding entertainment, where we're sharing news and information, if that's all underwritten by advertising, and that's really corporate advertising, then what's possible? What is possible in terms of these platforms being able to? Can you speak candidly about things? Can you talk openly? it's not even necessarily direct censorship, but it could be indirect censorship in terms of what is being presenced and given voice to when it's being underwritten by corporations. We talked earlier about the car company not wanting to run its ad on something talking about anal sex.
Yeah.
You just extend that out.
Yeah.
I don't know why they just didn't advertise a bigger back seat. Well, I want to pick up on your censorship idea a little bit. This is going back a little ways to 1998 and back to my neck of the woods down in Georgia, where one of the big, most popular companies is Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And I find this pretty insidious. That, not only are they having Supermen thrown into their signs in movies, taking you right out of the action, but they were doing stuff sort of like direct advertising in schools. And so they were working with the high school system and offered $10,000 to the high school that developed the best marketing plan for selling Coke-sponsored discount cards.
Like they need a high school to do it.
And a great product, too, like a diabetes-inducing sugar caffeine
Good for
bomb.
the teeth.
What do you think is the proportion between them thinking they're actually going to get a good idea that they're going to use and them actually just using this as a means to market to these high school students?
Yeah, it's totally a way to get into the high schools. Yeah. So the marketing campaign made headlines, though, when at one school, Greenbrier High School in Evans, Georgia, they suspended one of their students who came to school wearing a Pepsi shirt during the school's Coke Education Day.
That dude, I wish I knew what his name, because he is our hero for the do the opposite segment.
That's right. Hey, you guys, here's a review that we got close to Earth Day this year. This one comes in from Laura. She says, I'm loving your new season. I'm trying to move past doom and will be out marching for insects on the day after Earth Day. Thank you for your amazing podcast.
Well, that's nice to hear.
I think that marching for insects is incredibly laudable.
I do too. I mean, that's pretty cool. You don't get a lot of insect rights marchers out there.
No, you don't.
The pro-roach lobby is not super strong.
But, I mean, critically important part of the ecosystem. So thank you, Laura, for listening. Thank you for doing your part to get us the hell out of Crazy Town. And anyone else out there that wants to leave us a review or rating, please do so. We love that. Helps others find the podcast.
I think I'd like Laura if I met her.
Every decision I've ever made in my entire life has been wrong. My life is the complete opposite of everything I want it to be.
If every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right.
One place you can start doing the opposite is inoculating yourself against the psychological warfare that's being waged against you by advertisers. You guys ever read a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini?
No.
I read this way back in college. It was really popular, and it's, I think, had subsequent editions. Of course, kind of sad to say, but the book Influence was very influential, especially on marketing programs and business schools and stuff. Anyway, the author, Cialdini, he catalogs some of the marketing shenanigans that go on. And I don't want to go through all of them, but one example is he talks about the power of reciprocity, which is this thing that we all have where we feel indebted if we receive a gift. So, Jason, you give me something, I kind of feel like I need to give you something back. And so if the advertisers and marketers use this all the time, it's the idea of like you see free samples at the grocery store, then you're inclined to want to give back to the company that gave something quote unquote free to you.
Right.
So figuring out what's going on, understanding some of your own psychology,
biases,
your cognitive biases, it's a really good way to kind of immunize yourself against these tricks and sort of just like you can be in the analytical mind, realizing what's going on.
I think that's true, and especially important in this age of social media, where just being aware that they're tracking stuff, that they're going to be targeting you, devices are listening. being aware of this can help inoculate you.
And there are tools that are out there to protect your privacy and to limit some
the most important one is the off button.
Yeah, right, exactly.
A big thing I think for me, because I was talking earlier about how content is news and other forms of content that we rely on is influenced by corporate sponsorship and advertising dollars. Well, a positive sign that I think we've seen in recent years on the internet is a proliferation of basically people having their own sort of newsletters or websites that are supported with subscriptions. So whether people are on Substack, which I think it seems to have a real dedication to free speech. But there are other tools that people use to allow their members, people who really value their perspective, the content that they're developing, to support it directly so that they're not reliant on advertising. So using those premium membership things, finding people you like and directly supporting them.
Well, and also finding sources of information that aren't ad supported, like our very own resilience.org.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And then, gosh, how do you escape from consumerism? Well, I think part of it...
Is that a movie with Kurt Russell?
Definitely.
With lots of product placements in it?
Well, I think there's a difference maybe between the consumerism that is this behemoth corporate consumerism versus going local, finding the local food suppliers and craftspeople. So I think getting away as much as you can from the stuff that is sort of the big corporate advertising and figure out how to get stuff that
but I don't know, man. You go to the farmer's market, and those guys, they're so evil and Machiavellian. They're constantly giving like free samples.
I know, free
of
cucumber
peaches
slices and stuff like that. Oh,
you got to watch out for those
reciprocity.
Guys. Yeah, little honey pieces of honey.
We got one of them right here next to us. Yes. This guy is running a CSA, and I don't like that one bit, Jason.
I mean, they seem nice, growing organic food locally. Got a young family or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's all a con.
Makes you want to vomit, not eat. All right. Well, if you do manage to escape from consumerism, that doesn't really stop the advertisers from still exerting all this power and manipulating and doing their whatever evil crap. So some point down the line, we're going to have to figure out how to limit the power that advertisers can wield. And we do have a precedent for this. There are restrictions on advertising that to advertise things that promote unhealthy behavior. Like there are certain things that you can't advertise on TV, like tobacco anymore.
I miss Joe Camel, man.
Yeah.
I especially loved it when you go in a store and they got a Joe Camel poster right at 3 foot high level, right there for the kids to see.
I remember. I miss when the family physicians were promoting tobacco use.
Right.
That was great.
Right.
Those were the days.
Right. They're smoking while giving you your checkup. Right.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, that's another is limiting advertising. Like you say, Joe Camel was sort of designed as this cool animated character for kids to enjoy. And there are places in the world that recognize that's really not healthy for society, and they stop advertising from doing that.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to our friend Steve Lambert, who I don't know if this thing is still around, but he did a really beautiful thing, which is he created this add-on for Firefox, like an extension and
the web browser.
Yeah, the web browser, and what it would do is it would basically replace. It wouldn't just block these sidebar ads or whatever. It would replace them with beautiful pieces of art.
Yeah.
You have a nice experience, going on the internet.
And for sale, there are NFT options on those.
I think that's the next one that he's working on.
Okay.
And if he's not, I'll talk to Steve about it. Yeah.
That is pretty cool. And if you want more ideas about how to limit advertising and do some kind of activist things, Adbusters is a cool organization and magazine that is always coming out with ideas on that front. And I've enjoyed looking at them over the years. They're a pretty irreverent bunch over there.
I remember during the main rant, Ashar, you talked about how there's almost a censorship of what's permissible because if you're a content provider, you got to worry about your advertisers and whether they're going to support you anymore. If you say something they don't like, right? And I think that's a real problem. And it's not just specific. It's also really deep in our culture. And I would say that there's a real limitation on what is permissible to speak and the kinds of information that gets out there and is covered. In sort of polite neoliberal corporate consumer culture, the stuff we talk about in this show is kind of radical.
Yeah.
And so, I work hard to get advertisers for us, right? And it's a lot. We have some great sponsors.
We do.
Yeah. But I think calling out like the BS that the conversation is so limited, like an Earth Day, you can talk about electric cars, but not about don't move so much, power down.
Right. So you're talking about dinner parties, like shouting down your relatives? Is that what you're calling out the BS?
Oh, just the fact that the conversation is so limited, just acknowledging that and just talking to other people about what is really going on here. This greening the world through consumerism, for example, is a bunch of BS.
In some ways, what I would say, this all boils down to in all kinds of relationships that you have with products, the things that you need to buy in your life and where you turn for information and entertainment, use that as a filter. Like, you want to support stuff that is not reliant on advertising to exist.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think to wrap this up, I've got a treat for you guys, okay?
Oh, really?
I parked a van outside. It's Marlboro, and I'm going to throw both of you right through it.
Oh, nice.
We want to give a special thanks to Ilana Zuber, our star researcher of the watershed moments through history. Without her work, there's no way we could have covered such sweeping topics this season.
Yeah, and we also want to thank our other outstanding volunteers. Anya Steyer provides original artwork for us, and Taylor Antal prepares the transcripts for each episode.
And a big, big thank you to our producer, Melanie Travers, who helps us bozos stay professional.
And finally, thanks to you, our listeners. If you want to help others find their way to Crazy Town, please drop us a 5-star rating and hit that share button when you hear an episode you like.
Guys, I'm a little worried. I kind of have a confession to make, but I think this creates maybe an existential threat for the viability of Crazy Town.
Well, dude, are you okay?
No, I'm not okay. Okay, you can tell I'm a little upset. I couldn't get an ad for today's show. I could not. Nobody wants to touch us.
Is your imagination okay, Jason?
Is that because we did a whole thing about how bad advertising is?
I don't know. I think we got to go back to the drawing board. We got to figure out something we can market. This show, it's dead. If we can't get sponsors, it's dead.
Okay. All right. So, I hear you're upset. Our next episode, let's do it about how great crypto and NFTs are. Can we do that?
Oh, God.
There's so much crypto money out there right now.
There's so much. They just throw it at us. Yeah.
Let's just do that one.
We can do a follow-up guest interview with Matt Damon.
Okay.
Damon.
We'll just do one, okay? And then we can get back to what we're doing before.
Oh, we'll make so much on that one show.
Yeah, and then we'll be good. All
okay,
right?
Thanks,
we're
Matt.
good.
That's why you're the executive director.
Crazy town. Da, 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 crazy town.